Hi, my name is Senator Katherine Clark, and welcome to Senate Perspectives. I am so pleased today to be joined by John Rosenthal. He is the founder of Handgun Violence and also the president of Meredith Management, a real estate development company. He started Stop Handgun Violence in 1995 and helped enact the Massachusetts Gun Control Act in 1998. And if you've driven on the Mass Pike near the Fenway, you've seen his very moving and powerful billboard. He's also co-founded Common Sense About Kids and Guns and the American Hunters and Shooters Association. Gun violence continues to put our communities and especially our young people and children at risk every single day, as we've seen in our own district this year and also across the nation. And I'm so pleased to have John here to talk about what we can do and what action we can take.
Thanks, Katherine.
Well, thank you for joining us. So the statistics around gun violence continue to be staggering. Just to name a few, 30,000 people will die in America this year due to guns. And of those, nearly 2/3 are suicides. Which is a fact that we often overlook in this whole debate and discussion. And most heartbreaking to me as a mom of 3 boys are 8 children a day across the United States will die from gun violence. I often think of that as my 5th grade son entire basketball team that he played on this winter every single day across America. Do you see these numbers changing? What is the story they're telling about where we are?
Well, first of all, I'm a gun owner and a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. And I started Stop Handgun Violence in 1995 as a business person and a gun owner concerned about gun violence and the fact that so many kids were dying. In 1995, it was 15 kids every day. Today, it's 8. In 1995, it was 106 Americans every single day. Today, it'll be 87 more Americans will die from guns. It's a public health epidemic that can be prevented. If the goal was to reduce injuries and deaths, we would reduce access to guns without banning them, but we would make it more difficult for criminals and terrorists and children and the mentally ill to get guns. But instead, federal gun policy, truth is stranger than fiction, but federal gun policy is designed to sell as many guns as possible to anyone without detection. And the result is 30 to 40,000 deaths a year from firearms. More Americans have died from guns in the last 35 years than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined. You could fill Fenway Park 3 times over with the 110,000 kids killed from guns over the last 30 years. And half of those kids would be white kids from the suburbs and rural America, largely from suicides and accidents, and the other half would be non-white kids from inner cities where there's homicides with firearms and gun violence with firearms. So, that's what we're facing. We as adults have let our children down at the rate of losing a classroom every 3 days, like Newtown, every 3 days.
Yeah.
And kids shouldn't have access to guns.
Yeah. You're a gun owner, and as you said, you believe in the Second Amendment. How come this has not been framed, do you think, and how can we change the framing that is just what you said? This is really a public health epidemic, and we need to approach it that way. How can we help frame those and put those 2 issues together, the Second Amendment and the public health aspect of this?
We need to frame it like we have done successfully in Massachusetts. Urban industrial Massachusetts has the lowest firearm death rate in the nation per 100,000 population. And we border Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont that don't even require background checks for all gun sales. So Massachusetts has proven that gun laws work. and the legislature and the governor in Massachusetts are the leaders in the nation. They don't even know it in most cases, but they're the leaders in the nation. So we treat guns like inherently dangerous products that they are, like automobiles. We require safety training before you can buy a gun. We require that that we make the gun manufacturers put safety features into their guns if they're going to sell them in our state, like seat belts and airbags. We require child safety devices and trigger locks on guns, and we also hold the gun industry accountable if they don't do it. They can't sell their guns in Massachusetts if they don't do it. That's unique to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And we also require that gun owners like me store their guns safely unless they're in our direct control, and that reduces suicides and accidents among kids and teenagers who are, you know, by definition temporarily insane. You don't provide unrestricted access to guns or any other dangerous product or alcohol to children. And then, you know, among, you know, the elderly, which children, teenagers, and the elderly are the most susceptible to suicide with firearms. That's going to be a hard one. But that's going to be more like peer-to-peer. If you know, if you see somebody who's going through a tough spell, you know, it's always good to ask, you know, do you have a firearm in the home? Is it stored safely? You know, would you like to get rid of it? You know, in the case of elderly sometimes. And in the case of teenagers, you know, you have to ask, especially if you have boys. You know, before your boys go play somewhere, are there guns in the home and how are they stored? But this whole combination of changing the debate from unrestricted access to guns to how kids, criminals, and mentally ill are accessing guns, and then having very targeted laws that help reduce access to guns by kids and criminals is what has made Massachusetts the model. And we need to replicate that model. And unfortunately, Congress isn't interested in that. Congress is interested in the money they get from the special interest gun industry that funds the NRA. That's their lobby group. And as we saw a couple weeks ago in Congress, the U.S. Senate couldn't even find 60 votes to require criminal background checks for criminals and terrorists only at gun shows and on the internet, and that couldn't even pass the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. It didn't even get to a substantive discussion of the merits of that bill, right? It voted down on a filibuster where we're not even having that kind of discussion and really bringing that forward. And I have yet to find anybody in the full range of opinions on this topic who thinks that criminals should have access to guns. That seems like a basic point of common sense change that I haven't found the person who makes the argument that criminals need to access guns. So what do you think? Do you think the NRA in this particular case has overplayed their hand? Do you think there's going to be a public backlash? Because I certainly sense it in my communities.
Well, there certainly should be a public backlash. Sandy Hook changed a lot for people because, you know, a lot of people thought that gun violence was an urban problem, was a non-white American problem, was someone else's problem. And then all of a sudden, you know, 20 mostly beautiful little 6 and 7-year-olds get massacred. And now, you know, the majority community is saying, oh my God, that could happen to our children in our suburban community. And guess what? That's true. That is true, because in 33 states, there is no background check requirement for gun sales. So criminals, the mentally ill, and terrorists even can go to Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and 33 states in total and buy an arsenal every day of military-style weapons and large ammunition magazines like the AR-15 used at Newtown or by the DC Sniper or at Aurora without detection. And that weapon used at Aurora, 71 people were shot in a movie theater in Colorado, including a 3.5-month-old killed in her mother's arms, a 6-year-old killed in her seat. In Iraq and Afghanistan, veterans who survived those wars killed in that movie theater. That AR-15 was made in Massachusetts by Smith & Wesson.
Wow.
The Bushmaster used at Newtown is made in Maine by a company called Cerberus Capital Management, who owns Steward Healthcare, who own 11 hospitals in Massachusetts. Bushmaster and Cerberus, Cerberus also owns Chrysler and got a big bailout. Cerberus owns Bushmaster and 35% of the gun industry and 11 hospitals in Massachusetts, the third largest employer in our state. They are making money on selling weapons of mass destruction, which is what assault weapons are when they can kill 20 kids within minutes, and making money in the emergency rooms off of us in Massachusetts. They're getting away with murder, and Congress literally gave the gun industry immunity from lawsuits. The gun industry can make weapons and market them directly to criminals. 2 of the handguns used at Columbine High School, 36 people shot, were marketed as having a finish resistant to fingerprints. Who cares about fingerprints? Another weapon used at Fort Hood to kill, I think it was 32 people at a military base.
Yes, I remember that.
Marketed as capable of penetrating 48 layers of soft body armor. That shooter used that weapon on a military base because he knew people would be wearing soft body armor. So how is it possible that the American people have allowed Congress to be purchased by the gun industry? It's not about the NRA. The NRA has no money. They get all their money from the gun industry, who is unregulated and can't be sued. Think about how much money they have. And now they own Congress such that there's no background check for gun sales, including to criminals and terrorists. There's no regulation on how they make or market their guns. They can't be sued. And we are losing 87 Americans every day as a result of their greed.
So when we look at Massachusetts, that has some of the best laws, what lessons can we apply federally? Is it about holding the gun industry, gun manufacturers accountable? Because often this debate gets placed on gun owners who feel like, I do the right things. I'm licensed, I keep my guns safely, and so why do you keep coming back at us? How do we change this debate so that it is clear who we are really aiming this at? We're aiming at an industry that is very profitable and saying it's not about licensed, law-abiding gun owners that are the vast majority of gun owners. It's about making this product, as you said, inherently dangerous safer. Like, how do we change that, and what lessons have we learned from Massachusetts that we could apply?
Well, in Massachusetts, again, what we do is we target our laws for the constituencies around guns. So as a gun owner, I have to lock my gun unless it's in my direct control. Gun manufacturers have to build safety features into their guns, and they can't market directly to criminals. We require a background check for all gun sales in Massachusetts, and we have strict sentencing requirements if you use guns in the commission of a crime, and we also come down very hard on gun traffickers. That's what you have to do, and you have to enforce those laws.
Yeah.
But because there isn't a uniform national law that even requires a background check for gun sales, you have states enacting their own laws and the federal government not doing anything, except for tying the hands of law enforcement. For instance, we heard recently that members of Congress were criticizing the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for not sharing information on the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yeah.
These very same senators in Congress are the ones that have said and actually enacted laws that said that the FBI can't maintain gun purchase records for more than 24 hours. So if a federally licensed gun dealer runs a background check through the FBI has to destroy that gun purchase record after 24 hours, because Congress has said the FBI can't be trusted to maintain a registry of who has purchased firearms. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms can't regulate any secondary sales, any private sales, including at gun shows, or they can't regulate smokeless and black powder used for pipe bombs and used in the pressure cooker bombs here at the Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
So Congress has tied the hands of law enforcement to know who buys guns, and only federally licensed gun dealers run background checks, and they only run about 50 to 60% of the gun sales through, the NICS system, or the National Background Check System. Private dealers can sell guns without any background check, and they sell about 40 to 50% of guns every year. So again, Massachusetts has taken a very responsible approach, and we just require responsibility and accountability on the part of gun dealers, gun owners, gun manufacturers, and law enforcement. That's it. But the federal government has done nothing except for tie the hands of law enforcement and allowed unrestricted access to guns by kids, criminals, the mentally ill, and even international terrorists who have been proven to come to the U.S. to some of the 5,000 annual gun shows where you can buy assault weapons and grenade launchers without an ID or a background check.
Yeah.
What's remarkable is we only lose 30 to 40,000 Americans every year from guns. When guns are unrestricted in this country, I'm surprised we don't lose more.
Yeah. So what do you say to the law-abiding gun owner who feels like this is really coming down on them, and they've taken the safety courses that we require. They're putting things, the locks, they're storing their guns correctly. How can we say to them and answer that argument? It isn't about more gun law, enforce the ones you have. Do you think there's something valid to that argument in Massachusetts?
Absolutely, and 90% of Americans polled recently support a universal background check on all gun sales, including like 75% of NRA members.
Which is exactly what we have in Massachusetts, universal background checks.
Yeah, you can't buy a gun unless you have a background check and a license, and the license is issued by your local police department. But what's interesting is that the NRA doesn't represent the majority of Americans or even gun owners.
Yeah.
To join the NRA, it's $35. It costs them about $100 to get through marketing and collateral material to get that member. But you can't vote for the board of the NRA unless you give $1,000, and it's a very small number that does. And as a result, the board is made up of the most extreme, anti-government, paranoid people who hate law enforcement and hate government, and think that everyone should be armed with military-style weapons because the government has them. So that's like saying everyone should have a nuclear weapon and a tank in their front yard. It's irrational. But they're an extreme special interest group, and they'll do anything that the gun industry tells them. But what's absolutely outrageous is members of Congress go along with this nonsense.
Yeah.
Members of Congress, our Congress is so broken, that the gun industry can convince them through their blood money campaign contributions that it's okay for criminals and terrorists and the mentally ill to have unrestricted access to guns without detection, and that law enforcement's hand should be tied so that everybody can be armed to fight a renegade government, and Congress subscribes to this nonsense. So what we need is the reasonable law-abiding gun owners who care about their kids as much as you and I do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To tell the NRA to leave them if they're a member, and tell their members of Congress that they want gun rights, but that doesn't conflict with reasonable common sense restrictions to make it harder for criminals to get guns. And the first thing that anybody should do, if you have a pen out there, 202-224-3121 is the switchboard at the U.S. Congress. Call it, and call it every day.
I think you must.
I hope people do. Look, we live in a democracy, but so much of our policies in this country now are controlled by special interest, greedy companies, and the epitome is the gun industry that's regulated, that's unregulated, and and we need to hold them accountable because our children are at risk. We don't have the gene to bury our children and ever be the same. And the children that died at Newtown and the 3,000 more that will die this year from guns, remember, kids shouldn't have access to guns. It is adults' responsibility to keep their guns away from children. 3,000 more will die this year because adults have let them down and are irresponsible. And another 30,000 will die this year of Americans because guns are unrestricted, and it's solvable. We simply need to do what Massachusetts has done. I mean, there's things that we can do to improve our gun laws in this state.
What are some of those things? We have a lot of legislation pending this year that will be coming up for debate, I hope shortly. And we're also getting some pushback. We've got the toughest gun laws in the nation. What more do we need to do? So what do you see as some areas where we could improve, even in Massachusetts?
Well, 60% of all guns traced to crime in Massachusetts come from out of state, but 40% come from in-state. And they mainly come from home break-ins, car break-ins, people not locking their guns, and criminals breaking into houses and knowing exactly where you go. You know, you go to the bedside table, you go to the husband's closet. People need to store their guns safely, lock them away in a safe. That would help a lot. We have a safe storage law. But because 40% of guns traced in crime come from Massachusetts, the governor has proposed a 1 gun a month law that says that nobody can buy more than 1 gun a month, 12 guns a year. Because the only people that buy more are gun traffickers. So let's just make it harder on gun traffickers. And look, most people can't afford 1 gun a month, never mind 12 a year. So that's not going to have any impact whatsoever on law-abiding gun owners. Another one that I think is important is that all gun sales go through a federally licensed gun dealer. So as a private gun owner like myself, I can sell legally in Massachusetts 4 guns a year if I want to for my own collection. And I'm supposed to do paperwork, and I'm supposed to file that paperwork, and I'm supposed to make sure that whoever I sell the gun to is licensed for that type of weapon. But the governor has proposed that those private gun sales go through a federally licensed gun dealer, let them run a background check. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And how would that mechanically work? Would you just go to a licensed dealership and just ask to pay something to run it through their system?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for federally licensed gun dealers who are playing by the rules to make a little extra money. Maybe it's $10 to have a background check. Yeah. That way I know as a private gun seller that I'm selling to somebody that not only passed a background check when they got a license maybe 5 years ago from their local police department, but their situation hasn't changed. I think that makes a lot of sense. I would also like to see the legislature enact a law. Right now we have a prohibition on the sale of large capacity ammunition magazines.
Something we've seen offered in Congress as well. But
that's right. It was stripped out.
Traction.
That's right. It was stripped out. But these large ammunition magazines are what are used in all mass shootings, because the larger the magazine attached to your weapon, the less you have to reload. There are 11 children that are alive today because the shooter at Newtown with a 30-round magazine ran out of bullets, had to then change his magazine. The kids ran out of a closet and are alive today as a result of this guy having to reload. Now remember, law enforcement are given 13 to 17 rounds when they are issued a service weapon. Congress has said it's fine for criminals and terrorists and the mentally ill to have 30 to 100 round magazines without an ID or a background check.
And can these be purchased right over the internet?
Anywhere. I mean, you can buy, before Newtown, a 30-round magazine was about $12. Today it's $60 because there's such a run on them because everybody wants them because they were used at Newtown. There's a run on Bushmaster AR-15s because it was used at Newtown and people are afraid it might be banned. There's so much we can do. I mean, I go on MSNBC every week to talk about guns, and I was on with General McChrystal who talked about this AR-15 in the 30-round magazine used at Sandy Hook, same weapon used, you know, at Aurora and by the DC sniper, and it's a weapon of war. You know, he described what this 223 round that is used in the AR-15 is designed to do. It's designed to maximize soft tissue damage.
Yeah.
What is that weapon available for the general public? And it's a weapon of war. If we were just practical about this, if you really wanted to reduce injuries and deaths without banning guns, you'd simply do what Massachusetts has done.
Yeah.
And you'd get rid of these high-capacity ammunition magazines, and you would define let the military decide what a military-style weapon is, and then limit it to the military, and not make it available for criminals and the mentally ill. And then, you know, you would require a background check for all gun sales. You would require safe storage, and we would reduce the majority of the 30,000 gun deaths a year to a fraction, without banning anything except for the high-capacity ammunition magazines, military-style weapons, and cheap Saturday night specials. Plastic guns that will kill people, but have very little metal in them, so they can't be picked up by metal detection, for instance.
Right.
So that's how you reduce injuries and deaths without banning guns. Massachusetts has been the model. We've set the standard, and we just have to get Congress to find their backbone enough to do what we've done to save lives, or we need to change Congress in 2 years. And if it takes 2 years, that's another 60,000 dead Americans. And, you know, shame on us.
Do you see this issue coming back before the U.S. Senate? Do you think we will see it again over the next few months?
I think we probably will, but remember, the bill that the Senate voted on wasn't a ban on high-capacity magazines, wasn't a ban on military-style weapons, and wasn't even a universal background check for all gun sales. It was just a background check for gun sales on the internet and at gun shows. I mean, it's a start.
Right.
But are you kidding? We can't require a background check for criminals and terrorists because our Congress is intimidated by the gun industry and a special interest lunatic NRA? What's wrong with us? We need to participate in our democracy. I don't have to tell you that. You're a great example of participating in our democracy and being a great leader. But we, the people, need to support you, our elected officials, to continue to lead on this issue of gun violence. This is life and death every single day.
And a lot of people say to me, but in Massachusetts, our congressional delegation is there. What can they do to influence those who are out of state?
Well, we all have networks. We all have families. I mean, think about how much time people spend on their iPads and iPods and iPhones and, you know, texting and emailing friends and family. Get everybody that you know around the country to pick up the phone and call their members of Congress and participate in our democracy and participate in Organizing for Action, which is a new national organization set up by the president, or Americans for Responsible Solutions, which Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly have started, or sign up for Stop Handgun Violence at stophandgunviolence.org right here in Massachusetts, and we'll connect you to all the different networks that can help reduce injuries and deaths from guns without banning them.
That's right. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for the work you're doing and bringing a common sense approach to what is a huge public health epidemic. I'm really glad you came on.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Catherine. My pleasure.